Marine reacts to Could a Battalion of US Marines Defeat the Mongol Horde by Binkov's Battlegrounds. As always, I'm going to be leaving a link to the original video channel down in the description below, so go ahead and make sure that you check them out. So without taking too much time, I know my previous video on Binkov's channel took a little while to actually fully get through it, just because there was a lot of things to say, and so I'm going to try not to say too much in this intro, but I'm going to try to keep it very short. So as far as the Mongol Horde goes, there's 100,000. It's quite a fucking bit, but obviously we're dealing with people who aren't going to be as technologically advanced. I don't know too many of the tactics used by the Mongols. Obviously, they conquered quite a bit of territory of the world. Lots of people, I'm assuming bows, arrows, swords, horseback. All right, and as far as for the Battalion of U.S. Marines, let's go ahead and take my old one. We got, we had India, Lima, Kilo. We had Weapons Company, and we had Headquarters Company. Now, I don't know if they're going to include every single little one. Now, on top of that, are we including our Vics? Are we going to be including artillery? I mean, fuck, man. I don't think in my personal experience I ever saw arty too often or at all. But like, so essentially, what exactly is everything the U.S. Marine side of things gonna bring? And I know that this is gonna be good just because the way he presents all the information, he presents a lot of good numbers, and he's also very unbiased as far as who would win, at least from the first video that I saw from him. Now, obviously, my memory as far as the U.S. Marines, especially at the battalion level, are kind of iffy. I really didn't focus too much my time on that type of thing when I was in. So without further ado though, let's go ahead and get to the actual video. But before we do, don't forget to like, subscribe, it really does help me a lot. Get that notification bell right there, so you get notified every time I do upload. Sometimes uploading twice a day. Now recording them whenever I can, and then uploading them early the next day. That way when you all wake up, you got a fresh new video first thing in the morning. So let's go ahead and see who would win between a battalion of US Marines versus the Mongol Horde.
The Mongol Horde, led by the great Genghis Khan, started campaigns that would eventually lead to the largest empire in history by area. In the real timeline, Mongols kickstarted their empire by breaching the Great Wall of China at multiple places and conquering Chinese Xia and Jin dynasties. The city of Zhengdu, today known as Beijing, eventually fell, and the Chinese Jin dynasty with it. But what if someone did stop them? Imagine a modern-day US Marine infantry battalion suddenly taken back in time, appearing in front of the vast Mongol army. Could they withstand the attack and perhaps change history, preventing Genghis Khan from even reaching the Great Wall?
I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the video too, but we're gonna, the fact that's 100,000 of them, you got to really take ammo into consideration, obviously, and you're gonna be seeing exactly how technology can really make a difference as far as against the people that you're fighting. And on top of that, me personally, I think the Marines are going to win. Obviously being biased again, but I feel that at the very least they're going to have quite a bit of difficulty, especially if they get overrun. And this is going to be like, what kind of a position are they going to be in? Are they going to be in a defensive position? Are they going to be in a I doubt offensive or trying to be the aggressor, just considering the numbers. And I mean, you can shoot a lot, but if you get just overrun, they definitely have numbers. So it seems like it's going to be a numbers versus technology type battle.
Could the Marines stop the 100,000 strong Mongol Horde and defeat it? Genghis Khan transformed Mongolian clans into an empire. Genghis Khan led his horde into the lands of Chinese dynasties. Jin China was attacked in the year 1211, and its then capital Zhengdu, today's Beijing, finally fell in 1215. By conquering these Chinese dynasties, Khan and his successors created an empire that eventually spanned continents, reaching at one point to present-day Polish borders. The size of the Mongol army in the early 13th century is subject to debate. By 1225, the army was up to 180,000 strong, but just a dozen or so years earlier, when our scenario happens, it was smaller. The attack on Jin China is credited with 90 to 120,000 Mongol troops. Some say mere thousands were left in Mongolia. So Binkov will go with around 100,000, marching towards Jin China. But in our fantastical alternate history, the Mongol horde approaching China gets an unexpected visitor. Traveling through time and space, A US Marine Infantry battalion suddenly appears in southeast Mongolia, in the Horde's way. No third party will interfere. The Marines appear 15 miles in front of the Horde, knowing where they are and where the Horde is.
Alright, so real quick, we're going to be 15 miles in front of them, and we're going to be in the defense, which is a lot better than actually trying to go after them. I completely forgot to even think about the mortars that were going to be available. Think about it, since we technically have weapons company as well, we're going to have access to CAT 81 millimeter mortars. We're going to be, what are some of the things? You're going to have people with JAVs. I personally didn't spend too much time with them. Just a whole lot of stuff. I mean, and it's kind of hard just to think of everything off the top of the head, but let's go ahead and get back to the video.
For simplicity, we will disregard the psychological impact of the fantastical time-traveling event on the Marines and on the Mongols. Perhaps there were other smaller US units going through time, maybe Mongols captured them. So just as the US forces know their history and know the basics about the Mongols also know the basics about their opponent. But perhaps Genghis Khan still found the news hard to believe, since he's still obviously going for China. So what does a modern-day Marine Infantry battalion have? It has 3 rifle companies, a weapons company, and a headquarters or HQ, which is also the service company. Each rifle company, 180 soldiers strong, has its own HQ, 3 rifle platoons.
I know I'm going to be that guy, but that should be Marines. And it's not even like a triggering word, it's just the wrong name. It's like calling steel wood.
And a weapons platoon. Rifle platoons have basic weapons. The weapons platoon is more diverse. It has a machine gun section with 6 7.62mm guns. It also has a mortar section with 3 60mm mortars and an assault section. The battalion's weapons company has an HQ, a heavy machine gun platoon, a mortar platoon, and an anti-armor platoon. The heavy machine gun platoon usually has 3 50 cal guns. The mortar platoon has larger 81mm mortars with a total of 8 mortars. The anti-armor platoon uses javelin and TOW missiles.
As far as when it comes to weapons company, I didn't really have too much attention or as to like everything, little specific thing they had, but I don't think he mentioned a Mark 19. It's essentially an automatic grenade launcher,
totaling some 16 missile launchers. The battalion's HQ also has a communications, service and logistics, scout and medical platoons. Some of those have 60 men each. The HQ and service unit is responsible for feeding, supplying, providing data to, and commanding all the units in the battalion. The battalion has nearly 1,000 soldiers, with nearly 30% being HQ support troops. Now, those soldiers are light infantry, fighting on foot. Usually when sent on a mission, and not just whisked away through time and space from their position, they operate with further detachments. The weapons unit and the HQ units usually feature several Humvees. And if the battalion is a part of a larger expeditionary group, various armored vehicles, trucks and added Humvees are present. But for simplicity's sake, in this video we're interested to learn if pure infantry can withstand the Mongol army. An infantry battalion...
Okay, that could be a big game changer. And also with that small rocket, the ones that would typically fire are assaultmen, but I heard that I don't know if it's happened yet, but I heard that MOS was getting phased out.
Battalion is generally without vehicles or long-term supplies. When it is part of a larger system, a battalion enjoys the support of additional units. Besides the vehicles, there are also aircraft and artillery, all of which then make up a Marine Expeditionary Unit, a MIU. Those have not been taken through time here. But enough about the Marines. What do the Mongols have?
And real quick, before anyone says anything, or if you know things that I don't know, I've been out for almost 2 years. Please let me know down in the comments if there's any inaccuracies, because obviously I was just a simple 0311, right? I'm not going to know everything about the Marine Corps. I don't know everything to the exact dot. So whenever it came to like this grand scale, I'm only really going off what I remember, which I focus more at the very small level.
As said, the scenario assumes 100,000 soldiers marching towards the Marines. The Mongol army had a system of 10 soldiers per unit, 10 units per larger unit, and so on, all the way to the Tumen, numbering 10,000 soldiers. Pretty much all Mongol soldiers were horseback riders. Their secondary weapons were short scimitars, axes, and such. The primary weapon differed based on their role. 40% of the Mongol army were lancers, soldiers trained to charge an enemy on their horses, which even had some armor. Their lances were 12 feet long. 60% of the army were archers. They also rode horses, often shooting on horseback, using skirmish tactics. They would engage the enemy from afar and keep their distance. When needed, they would dismount before shooting. The Mongol bow was a pretty advanced weapon for its time. It was a recurved composite bow, meaning that it used the energy that the archer put into it more efficiently, compared to a longbow, for example. Even though the draw weights were smaller than for the longbow, the range achieved was longer, all while keeping the size of the bow fairly compact. Binkov has to stress that in the real world, the Mongol army might not even attack, but choose to use their superior mobility on horses and simply bypass the Marines. But this video will ignore that, and leave such broader scope options for a potential future video. The Marines know the Mongols are close. They have some tiny short-range drones at the battalion level, and they're hastily preparing a defensive line.
That drone part, from when I was in, it was still very in the testing type phase. I mean, shit, which ones did we use? We used, I mean, I didn't personally use, but I had, there was a staff sergeant or a gunny who used one in our company, and it was one that you would like throw, and it kind of, you know, goes flying. But apparently that shit is very expensive, and sometimes it would just, you know, go straight into the ground. So, yeah, he's taking a lot into account, and then again, you gotta also think about like what type of, like, what battalion is this? What are these specifically? The terrain that they focus in, you know, things of that nature. But I'm assuming it's gonna be flatlands, because for like, I don't know, if it's just gonna be a charge, right? And he's not gonna have the Mongols trying to encircle, because I didn't even think about that they could actually encircle, and then, you know, chaos can ensue. But then again, Marines wouldn't have to be as accurate, because then they could just shoot in any direction.
Several Tumens of Mongol riders might first encircle the Marines on the steppe, at a safe distance. The Mongols were known to use field armies consisting of several Tumens. Using flags and horns that they did use through history, they could command pretty large formations effectively. When hunting, for example, Tumens were known to hold a single line, tens of miles wide, and have its ends contract over the game, as the whole formation moved forward. So a large army of 4 Tumens, 40,000 riders and many more horses, encircles the Marines and starts testing them, perhaps rushing with very small archer units from all directions. The Marines would make good use of their mortars. The 81mm mortars have a decent range of some 6,000 yards. Each of those rounds achieves a 50% chance of wounding a person standing 35 meters away from the detonation. Neutralization through severe injuries or death would require targets being somewhat closer. The 60mm mortars are less lethal and don't have quite the reach. Still, they would contribute to overall terror among the Mongols and the horses. A lot of the Mongol riders and a good deal of horses would have been exposed to gunpowder by that age though. The Mongols have already been skirmishing with the Chinese dynasties and attacking the wall previously for some years. The Chinese were using arrows with gunpowder pouches, fire lances with gunpowder tips, and even crude metal body grenades, which would send out shrapnel upon detonation. Marines could and would of course fire from 1,000 yards away if needed, with snipers and large machine guns, but each time the Mongols might turn away and accept the casualties, until the period when Marines would be shooting less and less with those guns as they get low on ammo, and the Mongols would in the following attacks get a bit closer and closer. The Marines could fire even their regular assault rifles.
That's what I was thinking about too. I mean, well, especially with your when he said right now with your regular, say for example M4 or M27, right? It's still gonna be with what at very minimum 500 to 600 meters. I mean, I was always told the point target was 500. I believe he said in the other video that it was 600, but in any case, even the area target would be 800. So they're still gonna be getting a lot closer for you to be able to use that, but I thought about that too, and I don't know if I said it, but ammo is going to be a big issue. If they run out of ammo, fix bayonets, right? But you're dealing with people who are going to be in horseback, so they got to be very cognizant about their ammo and be very, very accurate.
From say 700 yards away, but they would be mostly just wasting ammo at such distances, probably taking half a dozen rounds or more to hit something, and that something would likely be the horse. As our Marines versus a Roman Legion video showed, with 50% accuracy, each Marine platoon could hit some 10,000 targets before running out of ammo. At 20% accuracy, that would of course drop to 4,000. If half of those would be horses, the Marine platoon would be down to a few thousand enemy troops.
Hold on, 34 riflemen with roughly... Okay, so each one having a... So what? 180 be 6 mags, and you got another one, 7 mags. So 6 mags including the... 6 mags not including the one in the rifle. But that's another thing as well. I don't know... Handgun ammo. That's going to be more officers and machine gunners. 300 various grenades. 9 automatic riflemen. Okay, well, despite that, if we had one when we would do trap mission or exercise, right? We had a thing called a speedball. Now that was essentially just a big Pelican case, just literally full of ammo, and I don't know if you'd be taking that into account. And if we just had that for like one squad's worth that would go into Osprey, imagine every single squad in this battalion having that much. Because I'm pretty sure the guys working with logistics and all that, headquarters company, I mean, I don't know the way they do things, but they're going to make sure, I mean, unless it's in a scenario where they didn't know there was going to be 100,000, but technically they would have, because they would have thrown the UAV, as you said a little earlier. They would budget out for how much ammo they need, and then throw a shitload more on top of that. And then also, damn, there's just so much to take into consideration, and it would be a hectic scenario.
Hit. So given that there are 9 rifle platoons in the battalion, plus counting some of the weapons platoon's equipment that the Marines managed to carry with them, it's plausible the Marines would simply lack munitions to neutralize more than another 20,000 or so Mongol troops.
Also, I just want to say that 50% thing, which, granted, I could see it at 700 meters, but as soon as it gets to the 500 or 600, I feel like at the very least that percent would go up quite considerably, considering that, at least from my own experience, a lot of people shot expert. But then again, I don't know if that was pit love, which essentially is people trying to help you get your score up, but I would like to think at least the majority of Marines are decent shots, even those working in an admin position, right? In my opinion.
At some point, when the Mongols would get better acquainted with the situation, the attack would commence. The Mongols might drive part of the unridden horses in front of their soldiers, as sort of a shield and view obstruction. Marines would have to keep together, but not too together, as greater density makes them more vulnerable to a shower of arrows. 900 Marines would likely take up 2 circle lines that are some 150 yards in diameter. That would enable them all to fire at once, maximizing firepower. Bunching the Marines further would both present a better target for the arrows and obstruct the view for some Marines. Shooting at 1,000 yards with snipers or perhaps saved up rounds for machine guns would be possible, but not very precise. Beyond that, it's likely only mortars would be used. The Mongolian riders would approach the mortar range in a canter, conserving energy. That's some 10 to 15 miles per hour. Several miles would have to be crossed under fire, with possibly over 200 rounds hitting the areas of the Mongol force within a minute. Mongols might cross some 350 yards during that time. More fire would continue, but eventually the Marines would run out of mortar rounds, after neutralizing a few thousand horses and perhaps half as many soldiers. At 5,000 yards away from the Marine line, the Mongols could keep several yards between each of them if using several horses in a column, spaced apart. Those circles would start getting tighter as Mongols get closer. At some 3,000 yards away, the canter would slowly start developing into a gallop. Galloping horses can cross up to 2 miles before exhausting, doing 30 miles per hour. That's still almost 4 minutes to the Marine line. At 1500 yards away, some Marine sniper shots might be attempted, and by then the gallop would be in full force. The Mongol columns would have to become longer, as there would be no room to keep them all in just a few concentric circles. 19 machine guns and anti-tank missiles would keep firing, possibly cutting down a horse every second or so. Another 1,000 or more horses might die within a minute, with many riders. During the last minute, pretty much all of the Marines would be firing. 40mm grenade launchers would still be silent as they lack range, but fire at say 700 yards would be very imprecise. Perhaps a dozen rounds might be needed to neutralize the target. Automatic fire would be out of the question for the average Marine if sufficient precision is to be held. At 400 yards, precision would be better, but combat stress would still cause many misses, meaning
I can understand combat stress specifically in this scenario, just because if you're getting surrounded by all sides and if you're a Marine in this, I guess he drew him as a circle, is that you're not going to know how many are left, things of that nature. I feel like that I think this qualification is supposed to be the accuracy still. I think that should be a little higher, in my opinion. But honestly, man, I mean, I feel like at the very least, if the Marines do lose, they would be able to take out quite a bit of them. And then, I mean, if the Mongols win, I mean, it's seeming that the way he's describing them, they got really good tactics and they really know how to use their numbers to their advantage. And damn, I thought they were going to do more of a just, rush them and then get cut down. But I mean, I wonder if he's going to allow like a resupply, right? I mean, I doubt it, but I feel like that would at least provide a little support.
Meaning less enemies killed per second, and every second would be crucial. By 400 yards away, the 800 plus Marines that would be shooting might neutralize another 3,000 or more horses. A short digression. Would Marines have some anti-personnel mines? Unlikely, but possibly some at a battalion level, though not hundreds of them, as mine laying is usually left to specialized engineer units, not infantry battalions. And to place them in a circle 300 yards from themselves before the battle would likely mean there would be a single line of mines in a circle with a dozen yards between each mine, not really contributing to the overall firepower in a massive way, as unridden horses might set off most of them and probably cause the rest of the horses to finally scatter off. Also, would so many dead horses present a physical barrier for the Mongols coming after them? To a certain small extent, yes. The casualty figures are big, but the area is even bigger. The biggest casualty density would be between 700 and 200 yards away from the Marines. The average number of dead horses in the way would be 1 per every 300 square yards. While it's not likely many horses would be stumbling one over the another, some of the riders might be slowed down occasionally. 13 seconds later, by 300 yards away, the Marines would often be able to aim for riders themselves, if needed. Several rounds would still be needed to achieve a hit. Again, well over 1,000 more Mongols would perish. But then, at some 300 or so yards away, volleys of arrows would fly. A new arrow from a rider every several seconds. Out of starting 40,000 troops, some 30,000 might reach that point, if accounting for a few thousand that would flee. With 60% of them being archers, some 18,000 arrows would fly in the air towards the Marines, with further waves every several seconds, totaling roughly 150,000 arrows within roughly a minute. Now, those are ballistic shots aimed at a general area. The horse would need to be slowed down, and then arrows would be fired when all four legs would be in the air for stability. Today, a steady aim could produce a hit within a foot or two from a target at 300 yards. Of course, on a fast horse under stress, that would be far less. A 10-yard miss distance would not be unrealistic. Still, 150,000 arrows means almost 7 arrows per square meter of the entire circle area, probably more arrows per area at the actual Marine front line. Many Marines would keep getting hit. Even if the arrow just bounces off their helmet or it falls a foot from their face, it would cause a spike in panic. It would basically be constant suppressive fire on all of the Marines. And some of those arrows would make contact with unprotected skin. Actually,
at this point, I'm just trying to throw anything out there that would give the Marines an edge. I don't remember there being talk of what type of terrain, because Marines are not just going to be out in the open firing or even just digging holes. just anywhere, right? They're going to be in a position that's going to be very advantageous, especially since they're typically throughout history have never had, at least from what I can remember, moments where they're going to be entrenched in non-advantageous positions. So I feel like they would get a higher position or the high ground, and then that would obviously cause a little more difficulty as far as the horses trying to get up. But then again, they're really closing in. I don't think they're going to be able to pull this back. I feel like they should have been able to bring vehicles though, because the damn thing is like it's a part of the battalion. I mean, hell, fucking was it weapons company? Every time I was attached to them for a little while I was in trouble, and they literally had Vicks there for 3-7. I don't know. I just felt like the Vicks would have made probably a big difference as well.
Actually, a good part of each Marine, especially ones laying down, would be exposed. An arrow in a leg would cause at least several seconds of pause in firing. An arrow in an arm might neutralize most Marines. It's actually likely that more Marines than not would experience a direct hit during the first 30 seconds of the arrow barrage, and a quarter or more with a hit into a limb or other unprotected part of the body with at least one arrow. The firepower that the Marines would put out as they're being peppered with arrows would thus rapidly diminish. After the distance does get to 200 yards, the Mongol archers would likely slow down considerably, with the lancers overtaking them at full gallop. Some Marines that would be left shooting would mostly be shooting at the terrifying mass of incoming Mongolian lancers. Visibility would probably be quite poor, with so much dust kicked in the air by so many horses in a small area. Perhaps a few thousand horses might still be hit, with Marines firing indiscriminately until the Lancers finally reach the Marines and plow through them.
I also do feel like I don't think he included, I guess, combat stress to the Mongolian Horde as well. Or like, I mean, he saw that he mentioned in the beginning that they would be familiar with them. But if you see a buddy get blasted by any type of round, it's going to probably create some hesitation. I feel like, at least in some of them, creating a little bit more chaos. From what it seems, and obviously, you know, I would want the Marines to win, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. I feel like the Mongol Horde is getting seen as just the force that I guess is like, not robotic, but like, you know, just keep going. I mean, then again, they conquered a majority of the world for good reason. I don't know, man. It's not looking good. And there's a lot of information that he does bring, and from what it looks on paper, but you know, always so many things to consider. And in this type of scenario, it's always got to be to eliminate every single variable, because if you included every single one, this video would be probably it wouldn't be surprising for it to be a couple hours. But he at least provided a scenario that was pretty, for the most part, very realistic, I guess. I mean, yeah.
As often in history, a person on foot, especially one not trained to deal against a cavalry charge, has little chance against a lancer. Within seconds, the Marines on the perimeter of the circle would all perish. If they lay down arms, some of the inner circle Marines could be taken as prisoners, as Khan would likely order some to be left alive. Capturing people from the future could be a worthy asset. But would such Mongolian attack actually succeed, or would the casualties cause the horses or even troops to break rank and flee?
I brought that up, didn't I? I did. I mean, obviously. Let's continue watching.
Talking about 8,000 to 9,000 dead or seriously wounded horses with a rider, on top of a few thousand horses without a rider. That's roughly 20% of combat horses, or perhaps 10 to 15% of all horses sent against the Marines, or 9% of the total Mongol force. Those are high numbers, but they are spread over several minutes and a large area. Throughout history, there were examples where attacks broke up after 10% of casualties, and examples where a quarter or more attackers had to perish before being broken up. So it's hard to really tell, as psychology is not really exact. But if you believe 20% losses would not break Mongolian ranks, then the Marines would lose the battle right away. Though if needed, a second field army of further 40,000 riders might be sent after some time. and with a lot of mortar rounds and 40mm grenades used up, the Marines would not be able to inflict as many casualties in a given time frame. The likelihood of them breaking up the second attack would be very small. In that
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's really just numbers. I mean, I feel like the Marines could have maybe pulled it, maybe, but I kept on forgetting that it's 100,000 people, right? Even if you have some of the, I mean, maybe if technology was further advanced, maybe, but then again, 100,000 people versus a little under 1,000, and they gotta find that amount of ammo. Honestly, even now looking at it, I don't think Vix. I mean, Vix could have maybe dealt more damage as well, but I don't think it would have been enough to overcome it. I mean, what do you think? Maybe 50,000 probably would have been more doable, or if not doable, at least more even. Because I feel like 100,000 is just, But it'd be very interesting to see what he would think about the Mongol Horde. 100,000 versus a couple of Space Marines. see how that plays out. I mean, just throwing that out there though.
In that case, perhaps 12 to 15,000 Mongolian troops might fall down in total. Not all of those would be dead, but even the wounded would be a burden on the Mongol army, and a lot of those would be hardened veterans. How much would that influence the rest of the Mongol campaign into China is unknown. For sure, it would postpone it, possibly by months or a year. While the Marines could not defeat the Horde outright, they might make a sizable impact, perhaps even weakening it enough so that the Xia and Jin Chinese dynasties somehow survive. Even a Pyrrhic Mongol victory over the Chinese might be enough to cause a chain of events that would cause the Mongol Empire to fall apart earlier than it did, or simply never reach the Middle East or the European regions. Again, Binkov does realize the two sides would not likely clash head-on. Mobility is the key of most armies, and the Mongol mobility would make sure the contact would go in another direction. Also, if the Marines had vehicles and greater mobility, they would be ones to dictate the battles. And of course, this is just one of many settings possible. Different terrain might favor the Marines more. Again, the more defendable a position is, the less likely the Mongols would be to attack head-on. But all that is another story that may get told someday.
Alright, let's go ahead and talk about that for a minute. Now, obviously it sucks, but you gotta think about it. 100,000 people, right? Versus a little under 1,000. I mean, what do you say? Like the max was maybe 15,000 that they would have killed. Still pretty good, considering the amount of numbers that entailed, right? And obviously, I'd always kind of been thinking throughout the whole video the amount of ammo, and there's all the other things that could have also come into effect as far as him mentioning terrain and maybe what type of battalion or having vehicles, having air support, things of that nature can all really alter what could have happened, right? And damn, dude, can you imagine if they had helos? At the very least, that would have caused quite a bit of stress in the Mongols. Now, obviously, I like the way he explains it though. Even though he mentions that one side is going to win, because obviously it's a versus, right? He also mentions that all the other little variables that aren't included, just because it would take an incredible amount of time, right? Now, I just like the way he's very unbiased, really just presents what the facts are, just in a specific scenario, because you've got to obviously have some kind of boundaries as to how this is going to play out, right? But honestly, thinking about it now, after everything he said, I don't think there's any scenario where I think a battalion of U.S. Marines would be able to defeat 100,000 of them. Maybe the whole Marine Corps. That's pretty much all I had to say in this video. Just the one little quick thing about me, and it's going to be military related, really short. I think the longest I ever stayed up was about 2 days, and it was over in Syria, where post was kind of an issue, especially at a moment in time where we didn't have a whole lot of people to be able to stand it, because we had people going outside the wire, which I never got the chance to, because a certain captain then ended up becoming a major, I think. kept on bumping me off the fucking list, right? And I was a little pissed about that because I was one of the few people who never got to do that. Although, even though nothing happened, I would have at least liked to have said I've been outside the wire, you know? But yeah, I got bumped off like 3 or 4 times, and it was... But in any case, because of that, we didn't have a whole lot of people to stand posts, and sometimes some of us were pulling hours back to back. Sometimes, even when it was our rest cycle, we couldn't even sleep just because, I don't know, it was hard to fall asleep. And when you would fall asleep, you wouldn't get that many hours. And then you had QRF, and you just had so many fucking BS. Trying not to curse as much these days, but yeah, so I think it was about 2 days roughly that I didn't get any sleep. And obviously I wasn't hallucinating or anything like that, but my eyes were literally fucking fried. I was tired, felt exhausted. I was literally falling asleep, almost standing up on post, which I would try to fall asleep on post, but I was a very paranoid person because I was always worried about my buddy falling asleep too, and then us getting caught both falling asleep. And obviously the bad case scenarios of if we fall asleep and then some shit happens, you know, things can ensue, and not in a good way. But yeah, that's just a little thing about me. That's gonna go ahead and do it for this video though. Don't forget to like, subscribe, really does help me a lot. Hit that dislike button if you didn't like it. It helps me improve the channel. If you're curious to see what's coming up next, hit the description down below. You're gonna see a list of about 5 videos. Top to bottom is gonna be how I view them. Until then, I'll see you all in the next video.